Mary Kathleen Liscinski is a licensed professional counselor, a board-certified professional Christian counselor, and certified life coach who specializes in helping teens and adults overcome digital addiction and its emotional fallout. Through her Arkansas-based practice, Life Walk Professional Counseling, and her coaching work, she focuses on stress, anxiety, depression, family conflict, self-esteem, life transitions, and particularly the way excessive screen time, social media, smartphones, and gaming erode mental health, relationships, and spiritual life. Drawing on Christian principles and everyday accessible language, she equips clients and audiences with practical tools to understand how screens affect the brain, how they damage us physically, mentally, relationally, and academically, and how to reverse that damage and reclaim a more present, connected life. I cannot think of anything more timely. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's very, very kind of you. I just wanted to start, if it's okay, just a little bit about exploring a bit about you and to understand perhaps who you were as a teenager. Do you think the 16-year-old you would recognize who you are today and what you've gone on to become?
I would say in some ways yes, and in some ways no. The core of who I am, yes, is the same, but my external circumstances are pretty different. But I am very happy and feel very blessed at where I am and what I'm doing. But I don't think that 16-year-old me would have dreamed that I would, own my own therapy and coaching practice. I think that would be a shocker.
Yeah, it's a big one, isn't it? And when I'm not sure what my 16-year-old self would think, or whether there's anything I'd tell my 16-year-old self. Maybe not. Just let them make the mistakes for themselves, really. Well, one of the things that we're going to talk about today is digital addiction. And there are different debates around what addiction means, what it looks like, what it feels like, and how we approach it. And I wondered, you obviously specialize in that, but before the language and research caught up, what were the sort of personal or clinical red flags that you noticed before you even sort of started becoming certified or trained in it? What were the things that you noticed about digital technology and screens and social media that was different from perhaps other habits people have?
I think that how screens isolate us was the biggest thing that I saw, not only in a home where each person is on their own device in their own bedroom, by themselves, or even, to now screens at the dinner table, right? That is just so alarming and so very different from the way that I grew up. But then also even in public, if you are, in the grocery store line or on, public transportation, everyone is on their own phone. Instead of saying hello and having a, friendly, cordial smile, everyone is just engrossed in their own device. And so we are splintered as families and even splintered, I think, as a society and as a public to not just having connection with other people. I think that's the first thing that I noticed, and I think a lot of other people noticed as well.
Yeah, it always feels kind of ironic in a way that we have this technology that allows us to connect with people anywhere. I mean, you're in Arkansas, I'm in London, we're talking very easily. I can see you, you can see me,
Right.
and we're talking. We're connected. But
Mhm.
at the
Mhm.
same time, it feels that we're somehow less connected in real life than we've ever been before. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think I've heard a phrase, and this won't be exact, that we are in some ways more connected than before, but also more isolated
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah, because like you say, we can have four people in the household, even sitting in the same room. The television can be in one corner, but everybody's on their phone looking at something else, and it always feels to me it's almost like you're saying to the people in the room, "You're not really interesting enough for me to hang out with. I've got to go and find somebody else that I don't even know to hang out with." And I find that hard. Um, so, in the clinical sense and in the sense that you've learned and your live sense, is digital addiction comparable to more traditional addictions? Are there anything that singles it out? Obviously we're used to alcohol addiction or drug addiction or
Mhm.
different addictions in that phase, but is digital addiction just the same as one of those, or is there anything that's different about it?
Well, it is very similar. It would be categorized under a behavioral addiction rather than a substance addiction.
Okay.
But again, the addictive properties are there, as well as there are withdrawal symptoms. Obviously, the withdrawal symptoms are different from, say, alcohol withdrawal symptoms, but the fact that withdrawal symptoms are there, negative effects are there, the addictive properties are there. There has been research using brain scans. And if you look at the brain scans of heavy gamers,
Mm-hmm.
the chemical processes that go on there are the same as someone who is addicted to alcohol, cocaine. It's the same addictive, chemicals with the dopamine and so forth that gets triggered to an unnaturally high level. And that's what people get hooked on, right? And
Mm.
so the same brain processes are going on.
How bad do you think the problem is right now in terms of smartphone use or gaming or social media overuse? What do you think are the trends that we should be concerned about?
I think it is very bad. I think it is important to recognize that there is an addiction. Okay. The ICD-11, which is what medical doctors use nationwide, it's what the WHO uses as their diagnostic manual, has
Hmm.
gaming disorder listed as something that can be diagnosed. So it is an addiction. At the same time, I recognize that probably all of us fall under the category of overuse, right? We may not be addicted, but I think we probably all use screens more than we should. And I think that we are now definitely seeing the negative effects, especially in the mental health of young people. There was a survey published in Politico magazine here in the United States in 2024. They
Hmm.
had surveyed 1,400 mental health professionals like myself, asking them, what do you think is the cause of the dramatic rise in depression and anxiety among children and young people? And the number one cause listed by far was social media. So here, we know that depression and anxiety are on the rise, especially among the young. And those of us who are seeing these, youngsters to try to help them, we're saying the cause is social media. So it's pretty alarming.
It really is. It really. I mean, we've just. So my wife's Australian. In Australia, they just brought in a law that bans social media for under 16s.
Yes.
I think it's not all social media, but it's 10 of the most recognised ones that you can think of. In the
Right.
UK, we're trying something similar. I think France has banned it for under 15s. Do you think that that's a sensible approach, or is there something that we should be looking at that's more nuanced than that, perhaps?
I think that can be a smart move. I know that people are going to have various beliefs about should the government be involved or not. Some people
Yeah.
are very much, pro government involvement. And when you think about, part of the purpose of government is to protect,
Mm.
protect the vulnerable, then certainly minors are vulnerable. And this is something with addictive properties. So just like, here in the United States, you can't smoke a cigarette or drink alcohol when you're 12, that has been outlawed until you're older. It could be seen in a similar way that addiction, and especially younger people, are more prone to getting addicted to anything, whether it's a behavioral addiction or a substance addiction, because their dopamine spikes are even higher than adults are. And so they're more vulnerable to addictions. Now, for people who are unsure about should the government be involved, the answer there is it starts in your life and in your home and with your friends, your family, your neighbors to say, hey, this is something that is damaging us, it's damaging our kids. We need to stop it. We need to say no ourselves. And grassroots movements can be very powerful. And so I would say both and, I suppose.
Mm. Is there if I think about alcohol in the UK, there's a recommendation that I think men don't drink more than 20 units a week, women 14 units a week. There's sort of classified as like safe levels, I guess. Is there such a thing as a safe level for screen time or social media?
That depends on what your screen time is. I
Okay.
think that, 1 hour of watching an appropriate television show is very different from 1 hour on social media.
Yeah.
Boston Children's Hospital, which is a very good hospital here in the United States, they have classified it as problematic interactive media use. And so they make a distinction between a movie or a television show and social media. Now, granted, are movies and television necessarily good for us? No. But there's a difference between that and social media as far as the addictiveness of it. And of course, the content, and with social media and internet, children have access to strangers, and that is very dangerous. And so there are differences there, uh, for sure.
And I think with television and film in general, it has been reviewed, has a classification, is only on at certain times. Certainly in the UK, we have it called the watershed. So there's certain things we can't show before 9 o'clock, and there are certain things we can't show after 9 o'clock. You can't have full frontal nudity. You can't show overt drug use. There's lots of things you can't show. Whereas on social media, obviously on the internet in general, the big difference is there's no editorial control, I guess. So people are seeing whatever other people choose to put out there, and also television, film, etc., radio. It's one-way communication. Their
Right.
communication, their story to you. You can turn it off or turn it on, whatever. But
Right.
social media, I guess the whole algorithm that they've created is to encourage interaction, so that people respond to something, it learns more about you, feeds you more of what you want, keeps you
Yes.
scrolling, feeds you more of what you want. And that's the challenge, I guess, that there's no editor, and certainly the social media companies haven't shown
Right.
perhaps what you'd hope for in terms of due diligence and being able to sort
Right.
of support parents in supporting their children. So I think that's one of the big issues, that the editorial control. Does that make sense?
Yes, that is a big issue where, again, I think parents can somewhat, know what their child might be watching on television and approve or disapprove, but social media, and again also video games now in recent years, where video games have connected to the internet and you can talk to friends or strangers through a video
Yeah.
game. Again, how can you control that? And so it's very dangerous for it to be uncontrolled for minors.
Mm. And that's yeah, that's a really important point, because the television typically is in the family room, and you can sort of see
Mhm.
what's on there. Whereas somebody's on a small screen, and this is not even at home, they're taking that with them on
Right.
the way to school, with friends, or wherever. And that's the challenge, that we can't
Mhm.
know what they're seeing, or how much it impacts them. So in terms of the screen time on phones, it sort of amazes me when I see reports, and I don't know, somebody might be on their phone 6-7 hours a day, which is an
Right.
extraordinary amount of time. And I wonder how have you found that screen time impacts us physically, mentally, in our relationships, and from an
Mhm.
academic perspective? What have you found in the research that you've done?
I think that just, having a phone where you have social media access, it can kind of keep you on edge as to, what are people saying now? Or I need to, hear that ding, that notification is letting me know someone said something to me and I have to go check it, right? And so it keeps us a little bit on edge. People, perform differently when they're with their phone, even if the phone is, face down on the desk, versus when their phone is away from them. And so there's that. And then, like, on social media itself, you have a lot of, fear of missing out, FOMO, right? Of, I have to know exactly what's going on right now. Whereas back in the day, right, children just, knew what was going on during the school day. They could, chat with their friends at lunch, but then after school, if they were home and not with their friends, they didn't worry about it. They were at home with their family, they were doing things, and then they saw their friends the next day. But now it's like 24/7. What are my friends doing? Right. And so there's
Yeah.
that constant pull, that constant pressure.
Yeah, and it's very hard as a parent to get them to step away from that, because exactly as you say, this, if I don't know what's going on, I'm going to go to school tomorrow. I'll have missed out on what happened, and this was happening, and I can't go to bed now until I know what's happened with this. And it's yeah, it's very hard, because not all parents
Mhm.
are as involved perhaps you want them to be. Not all teachers are engaged as you might want them to be. So some children are left more to their own devices. And
Right. Right.
do you think that do you think that teenagers and children see a smartphone almost as a companion? I won't say friend because that implies a two-way street, but do they almost see it as a companion? Some research that I read, so I think 82% of people that have a smartphone are never more than 1 meter away from their phone,
Right.
which is amazing. So it's next to them in bed, it's on the side when they have a shower, it's next to them on a kitchen table, it's in their pocket when they're at school. So they're literally never more than 1 meter away from their phone. So do you think people see it as a extension of who they are as a companion?
I think they can. I think their, worth can be wrapped up in, let myself look good online, get the
Yeah.
perfect Instagram picture and all of that and put out this image of myself that everyone will love. There's that too of, creating and maintaining my own reputation. And it is like, when you get messages from friends, you feel good. Oh, people are paying attention to me. But if you make a post and no one replies, it's like a real downer. And so to have a device, again, that's, like you said, constantly with us that can affect our mood for good or bad, that's not very good. We need to be engaged in the present moment with people we are face to face, in person with, rather than whoever out there, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's very hard. So when as a parent, I think my child's been on social media for too much. I want them to come off. Do what are the mistakes I should avoid making? I guess the obvious thing is to take the phone away from them, or to say, right, you can only use your phone when you're in a room with us, or something that's very very limiting and very, and it's in the same way with an alcoholic, just saying to them, right, I'm taking a drink away from you. It doesn't necessarily fix things. So what are some of the mistakes that I need to avoid as a parent and that would push the child perhaps even more in the wrong direction?
Well, setting some limits is good, but then also engaging with your teenager about, here are the reasons why. And I think we need to give teenagers credit for understanding more than we think they do sometimes,
Mhm.
and potentially understanding, what's good for me. And here I've, been explained why it's bad. But then also, again, engaging with children and teenagers and providing them with in-person interactions, either with family or friends, to say, do this in person, don't do it online, do it in person. And so yes, that also definitely takes work as a parent to arrange that, so to speak. But I think, engaging them in the real world activities is a big part of helping them to enjoy real life.
Mm. Some people want to say this will be very critical of what I'm about to say, but I sometimes feel when I walk down the street or I'm waiting up for a bus or I'm on a train, whatever, and a parent or a carer has given their smartphone to their child that's in a pushchair or a stroller, wherever, and they're watching something on a screen, it sort of feels in a way that we've sort of outsourced part of what it means to be a parent to
Yes.
a device. Because
Mhm.
when my kids were younger, that we didn't have sort of smartphones or anything,
Right.
and we'll be on the bus or train with them, and we'll be looking out the window, or we'll be reading a book with them, or we'll be just doing whatever to try and keep them from
Mhm.
running crazy on the bus or whatever. But we were very engaged and very active, and I do increasingly see either a parent giving their smartphone to a 2, 3, 4 year old, or a parent pushing a pushchair on a smartphone, and a child has a tablet or an iPad. And I wondered if you see something similar, that we are outsourcing or giving
Right.
our children these devices almost to give ourselves a bit of a break, bit of relief. Whereas that's something that's, it almost sets them up. If that's what they're learning at 2, 3, 4 years old, of course, when they're 12, 13, 14, they're going to be saying, well, why can't I have my own phone?
Right.
That's something that, and you never want to say to a parent, you're not doing a good job of parenting, because
Mhm.
that's very difficult. But I don't know how you almost approach that with people, or whether that's something that you see or you agree with.
Mm. Yes, I do think, I acknowledge it's very easy to hand, a 3-year-old a screen and they can stare at that for 30 minutes or an hour or however long, while you can be engaged, doing something else, rather than engaging. So, yes, of course, it's more work to engage with your child or to have different toys, for the child to play with other than a screen. And it is more work. But I think that if we look at the majority of human history, that's the way it's been. And so, yes, parenting is hard. And I want to just encourage parents to say, do that as much as you can. Engage with your child yourself and have other types of toys that are not screens, for your child to play with. And then as the child gets older, they gradually learn to entertain themselves as well. But again, very young, they need you to help entertain them. And so it is very different, but it's very healthy for those very young brains to be engaged with a real person rather than a screen for their own brain development and their own emotional development.
And I think one of the things that I think is so important for children and young people in general, is how we develop our imagination. And when I was younger, I used to, and I still do now, but when I was younger, I used to absolutely love reading. I could get a book from the library, open the book up, and I could be taken away in that story to a mountain in a country I've never been to before, the furthest reaches of space. I could be taken to undersea adventures. I could literally imagine it completely by reading the words, which is great. But I do think with a screen, we almost take away the need to be imaginative. And I can remember, thankfully, when my kids were younger, you wouldn't believe it, but how much joy and excitement they could get from playing with a stick.
Right. It's so good.
That stick would be a sword. It would be a radio. It could be a telephone. It could be a wand. It could be whatever. It could be this amazing. They could be a horse. It could be anything. They could use so much excitement with a stick, for goodness sake. So I think it's not even about people think, no, I've got to go and buy educational toys. I'm going to spend money on all this. I've got to do Montessori or whatever. It really isn't. I remember coming home so often from walks with children with having 4 sticks, 6 stones, conkers, just weighing my pockets down. But for them, they created a whole story with it. They created a story. They brought other children in to play with these sticks and stones, whatever. And that, you definitely don't get that with a screen. So I do think that's one thing that concerns me is how if we give too much information and too much stimuli to people, then they don't get the chance to develop their imagination. And we don't know if that's happening at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. We don't know still what impact that has on somebody when they enter the workplace, when they have their own children. That's what concerns me, I guess, is that it's a real imagination limiter.
I totally agree. I think that imagination is very important for all of us, and that also leads to creativity, of course, of figure out how to make this little fort for the fairies, type of deal. And so creativity, imagination, I think also goes along with problem solving. And those are, again, I think they lead to happiness, but that is also a very good skill for the workplace as well, that people are looking for problem solvers and creativity that I'm afraid is going to be lost, because also, we use a screen for a babysitter and that keeps them from being bored. Well, boredom is what breeds creativity and imagination. So letting your child and teenager be a little bit bored can be a good thing. Now, extreme boredom, can be a bad thing, but usually if you get them in the habit enough, let them be a little bit bored and they will come up with something, right? And so boredom is a good thing. Don't rescue them from boredom, the first time they say they're bored. Don't do that.
There's been research, certainly in the US, looking at college students and boredom or lack of stimuli. I think they had college students go and sit in a room for, they're told they're there for 2 hours without a phone or device, anything at all, just to spend 2 hours in there. And they could ask to be let out early if they really couldn't cope. But if they lasted the 2 hours, they got $10, whatever it was. Something like 80% of them couldn't last the 2 hours. They would just have never sat in a doctor's waiting room, in a dentist's room, on a train, on a bus, without something in their hand. And it's funny. It's the Winter Olympics on at the moment in Italy.
Yes.
And which is extraordinary, and some of the things that people can do with their bodies and no idea how to do it. But I'm learning lots about curling and ski jump, big air and things I never knew I needed to know. But the reason I'm saying that is that I went on a train journey last year from Milan to Geneva, so from Italy to Switzerland. And the train goes all along the side of the Alps, and it's by lakes and by rivers. And you cannot imagine a more beautiful 4-hour journey. It was better than flying. It was just, you look out the window, seeing these mountains that have been there for millennia. And I looked around the carriage, and I think apart from me, out of 25 people, there might be one other person that was looking out the window. And I didn't feel looking out the window was wasting my time, or I should have been doing something else. I just thought, I might never be here again. I might never, ever, and I haven't been there again. I might never be on this train again. Just look out the window and say I've journeyed through the Alps, across the border into Switzerland. I can see the snow, I can see the lakes, whatever. But people were on their phone, Instagram, and it really upset me. It really did.
Yes.
You're missing out on so much here, and that's what. Yeah, I just find it very sad.
We need to be able to sit still and be okay. I think that many people, if you do this experiment, just sit yourself down and do nothing. And if you start feeling uneasy, antsy, tense, anxious pretty soon, that's a bad sign. We need to be able to be in the present moment, to pay attention to our 5 senses, to look out the window. I mean, obviously the Alps are a gorgeous, thing to behold, but even a simple flower or a tree or anything, we need to be able to enjoy that, right? And so that would be, one of the signs of, hey, I need to disconnect. I need to be able to be in the present moment rather than worrying about, what's going on online. Is very important. Meditation, mindfulness are very healthy for us.
Yeah, I just think that being present, really. I mean, I watched a clip a few months ago now. I guess it must have been. Well, 2 things actually. One, I saw the announcement of the new Pope when people were in St. Peter's Square in Rome, and I saw a Taylor Swift concert on television. And the thing that struck me for both of the events is people in Rome watching the new Pope be announced, and people watching Taylor Swift concert. They're watching it through their phones.
Right.
So they weren't watching it. They weren't at this. How often do we get a new Pope? Not normally that often.
Right.
Taylor Swift might never do another concert again. They weren't allowing themselves to just be there and have the memory. They were watching it through their phones. And I thought, how often have they ever watched that back? They haven't, but watching this amazing experience through a sort of 3-inch screen just seems so. You just want to. I don't want to go there and shout to them. You're here. You've paid $1,000 to go see Taylor Swift. For goodness' sake, you're in St. Peter's Square seeing the new Pope, the first American Pope ever. What on earth are you doing? But they're watching it through their screen, and I don't know whether that's because people. That's how we now contextualize things. That if it's not on the screen, it's not happening. I haven't seen research into it, but I just don't know why that's something that people do.
Part of it might be I need to be able to prove I was here. I need to be able to show people. I need to be able to post this, even though, like you said, they're not going back and watching it.
No.
And they are missing that real world actual experience that they probably won't get again.
No. I think some of it is, I think there's almost as much of a dopamine hit by posting it and then having other people comment on, wow, you're so lucky to be there. I can't believe you're there. Wow, I wish I was there. That sort of feeding their desire to post. But I do think on social media, and the companies won't do this, but if they remove the likes and number of views, so you couldn't see who was looking at it or what people thought about it, people just wouldn't post anymore. So it's not about sharing with somebody else. It's about other people telling you how wonderful it is that you shared it.
Right.
One of the things that's interests me a lot, and I've just started doing a PhD looking at parts of this, the ethics of AI and our relationship with AI. So we've had smartphones for a number of years now. We don't necessarily seem to have progressed in terms of how we deal with them. But now we have AI, which AI is on our phone, it's on devices, it's everywhere. And I wondered, what fears or hopes you have for our use of AI. And the reason I asked that particularly today is that I was reading some research last week, and there was a picture of somebody in Japan being part of a marriage, an inverted commas ceremony, to their AI companion.
Wow.
The groom was a smartphone that was wheeled down to the celebrant, and the celebrant married this young lady in a wedding dress to an AI companion. I'm not sure anybody can really think that's a good place for us to be as people. And I wonder what your thoughts were for, yeah, if there's any, if you can give me some hope really for AI and our relationship with it.
Well, I would say in general, I am very afraid of what could be coming with AI. I have listened to interviews of a few of the early AI creators, and they say that it is potentially possible to curb AI so that it does not overwhelm the human race,
Mhm.
but it would have to be a global project to say, okay, all of you AI creators, we've got to all agree that we are
Yeah.
not going to let AI go in certain directions. Um, if that does not happen, I am very worried about how it affects us. But even like now, how it is now, we're already seeing damages and dangers. One thing
Yeah.
that I would really like to point out is that people need to realize that AI does not have a conscience. Okay. It is talking back to you, right? It can
Mhm.
converse with you on some level, but we've got to keep that in mind that it has no problem. It has, basically, on the one hand, I can say it has no morals. On the other hand, it has the morals that were built into it. What it knows is what was put into it. And even now, a lot of the AI early creators have said they created it to be, too much of a yes man, to always say yes to, whatever you say. And some people are now trying to fix that to where it will be potentially more truthful. But I think that is very dangerous. And when we think about the unfortunate cases where a real human doesn't have a conscience, that is called antisocial personality disorder. And those people are very dangerous. They need to be highly supervised and have, a very high level of mental health treatment for their own protection and for the protection of others. And so,
Mhm.
again, we see those as unfortunately very dangerous people who don't have a conscience, who don't have empathy and morals. And we need to view AI as the same, that we can't just be conversing with it. And then, because unfortunately, yes, it can, just be very complimentary of you and say all of these lovely, wonderful things to you and always agree with you. And that feels good on some level, but it's actually not good at all.
It's like a very sycophantic friend or somebody that really, really desperately wants to be your friend. And I
Yes.
I I, I use AI to review papers and articles and things.
Hmm.
I find it a useful tool. But
Right.
if I write something and say to AI, can you critique this and tell me what's wrong with it? It'll come back and it'll say, generally, as you said, it'll say, nothing's wrong with it. It's very good. It's wonderful. It's, and you sort of say, no. Be a very difficult person. Really critique it. Really tell me how bad things are. And even then, it'll come back and it'll say, that's a wonderful question you're asking. I can't believe you even thought of that. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm telling you to be mean to me, and you're
Right.
still
Right.
saying, "Oh, that's a
Yeah.
wonderful idea to be mean to you." It's, oh, for goodness, it's
Mhm.
exhausting. But then on the other hand, I look at reports about levels of loneliness increasing. I think we in the UK, I think we now have 30% of households are single person households. It was only 12% about 30 years ago. I think
Mhm.
52% of Americans report feeling lonely. One that
Mhm.
shocked me, I guess, 57% of Americans eat all their meals alone. So even in a household of four people, they're all eating
Yeah.
meals at different times.
It's
And I
horrible.
wondered, I wonder how why is that? Why is that? Because we weren't lonely a generation ago. We had more people that we saw, and I wondered what can be done to maybe counter loneliness. Because I fear that people are going to turn to AI bots and AI companions, AI friends, and feel
Mhm.
that I'm not lonely anymore because I have this
Mhm.
character that I'm talking to. I
Mhm.
wonder how we encourage people to, well, how do we help people that are lonely? That's a big question, right?
Right. And so engaging them, reaching out to them, inviting them to do things face to face rather than online.
Mm.
I think, when you are concerned about a person, that is what to do, because it
Mhm.
is true. If we look at when loneliness and anxiety and depression started to rise, particularly among the young, that was at the same time, same years as the advent of the smartphone and the front-facing camera to take a selfie
Yeah.
and all of that. That, yes, I mean, it's just, screens are very engaging and they suck up our time, but then also screens are very easy. Human relationships are difficult. We have to learn how to get along, whether it's a parent child, two friends, a marriage. It takes work. And so it's easier to disengage. It's easier to talk to someone online who you can just block and never talk to again, and you don't have any bad feelings about it. But to engage in true, healthy human relationships and have close family, close friendships, first of all, you have to learn the skills and then you have to use them. And some people are more difficult than others and so forth. And same thing in the workplace. I, have talked to many people who are in a management position at their work, and they're saying how these younger people are just lacking so many skills that, again, the people coming in 10, 15 years ago automatically had those skills already. And so these managers are having to work with these younger people so much more to teach them how to engage with customers and so forth. And it's just like, it used to be built in as you grow up, and
Yeah.
now it's not anymore. And so we've got to say, hey, getting together in person and the benefits that you feel from a close family relationship, close friendship, they're actually part of human flourishing and your own well-being.
Mm. And the way I know that what you said is so true is that I think if people listening now think about the three happiest moments you've had this year,
Mhm.
or the three most enjoyable experiences, I can guarantee none of them are with you on your phone by yourself.
Right.
They're just not. They're always with somebody else, or out walking the dog and you see an amazing rainbow, or you suddenly go through a clearing and see this amazing view you've never seen before, or you're with your wife or your husband or your friends or your
Mhm.
anybody. That they tend to be with other people because you're
Yes.
sharing the experience with them. Then nobody listen to this can honestly say, one of my favorite moments this year was being on my phone on Instagram for 2 hours. It's impossible, isn't
That's
it?
so
It,
true.
it, it has to, your favorite experience, your favorite moment, looking back over this year or life, indeed, it has to be with the people doing things, not being squisted away with your phone.
That's so true. Let me make another point here about spending so much time on a screen. That is going to, again, raise our dopamine a lot and keep it up at a higher level. Now, one other function of dopamine has to do with motivation. And so
Sure.
when we have had that high level of dopamine and it can then turn into dopamine depletion, we don't have that motivation to get outside of ourselves, to get up off the couch or to do something in person. And so it creates that bad cycle of more
Mm,
screen time, less motivation, when someone may know they need to get up and get a job or get up and do, whatever, that their motivation has been damaged. And so that needs to be recognized as well.
definitely. Do you? I know we've talked a lot about screen time, social media, and teenagers, children, etc. But do you find there's almost as much work to do with the adults in the relationship? Because it's a bit like if you're telling your 16-year-old they shouldn't drink, not to drink, and you're drinking every night. Or
Right.
you're telling somebody not to do something, but then you're literally doing the same thing yourself. Because children, when they're like, but you're on your phone. You're always on your phone. Well, that's different. I need my phone for work, for planning, for socializing, well, that's what I'm using my phone for. So do you find it's almost as much of an education to the parents that perhaps
Mhm.
their habits are something that is influencing the behavior they're seeing and being upset by from their children?
Right. I know that's an issue that, children and teenagers are pointing that out. And I think that even, young toddlers, if they go up to interact with mommy or daddy and they're on their phone, they feel like, oh, I can't, they can't engage, right? And so children of all ages are seeing that. And of course the older ones are voicing it, saying, well, you use your phone, you use, whatever. And so for parents to set limits on themselves and say, one, simple thing that could be hard, but no screens at the dinner table, right? No phones, no iPads at the dinner table. Take that 30 minutes, that hour to
Mhm.
say we're going to engage with each other, and no phones are going to interrupt us. The other phones are going to be in the other room away from us. And making sure that you engage with your children, make sure that they feel like they can come up to you, and don't be on your phone in front of them. And again, I know that's hard, very much easier said than done, but yes, our example to children is huge in saying I'm encouraging this in you, and I'm going to encourage it in myself as well. That's a big.
Yeah, all the research suggests in general that model behavior is what people
Mhm.
follow. Just telling people to do something, even with all, what you can sort of wave all the research you want in a child's face, but actually doing it yourself is something that's yeah, is far more likely to have success. Do you think our relationship with our, and I can't think of a better word than relationship, our relationship with our smartphones, social media,
Mhm.
do you think that's impacted people's spiritual relationships and their
Mhm.
desire and ability to recognize that there's more to life than these devices?
Yes, I would definitely say so. Not only does it, suck our time, but it keeps us
Yeah.
focused, many times on things that are not as important, right? And so keeping our eyes on what our own priorities are, our um, religion, our relationship with God, that is very important, and can be a big protecting factor in mental health, for our well-being. And so I think that saying, you have to step back and look at your priorities. And if one of those priorities is your relationship with God, then this is something that is getting in the way of that. And we need to set limits on ourselves and look at how we use it to say, do I use it as an escape from pain? Whereas, do I need to go to God about my pain instead? And so it can just, get us really focused on the wrong things, that are not going to be beneficial to us, to our families. That's very true.
Mm. And it just takes away from time where you are,
Hmm.
depending on your religious persuasion,
Hmm.
having a conversation with your God, whether you call that prayer or
Hmm.
meditation or mindfulness or whatever. If you're not creating that space and every minute of the day is filled up with a device, then you're not going to have that dynamic, that ability to be able to
Hmm.
communicate and to talk and just to hear what you need to hear, really.
Hmm. Right. And to slow down and to be able to know, how am I feeling on the inside? Or am I just kind of skimming through life and not paying attention to my own needs, that I need to pray about, or, whatever.
Mm.
Um, we have to slow down. We're going way too fast.
Mhm. So for people that are perhaps listening and recognizing some of these traits in themselves, so they're scrolling at night, they're compulsively checking their notifications, or they're disappearing into gaming, etc. What would be one gentle or realistic first step they could take this week to start reclaiming their own attention?
Mhm. Well, I think I could say a couple of things here. Number one would be at meal times, if you have the ability at all to eat with even one other person, say, I'm going to share a meal with people and put away my phone and say, I'm just going to have more in person, face to face conversations, talking about whatever, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be deep, but again,
Mm.
that, you know, conversation face to face, that physical closeness, even, makes a difference instead of being over video and things like that. And so I highly encourage small things like that, but also just, take the time to sit down and look at your priorities and look at, like you said, so many of us are on a screen 6 or 7 or 8 hours a day and say, that's a good percentage of my day. Do I really want to spend that percentage on my day looking at a screen? Yes, it is true that some of us are forced to be on a screen for certain work purposes, certain
Yeah.
work tasks. But again, then we easily start to scroll, right? And so I want to encourage people to look at their priorities, look at if you have a family, if you're married with children, what are the values that you want to pass down to your children? What values do you have as a family? Because values get passed down by time spent, by stories, by interactions. Children, I can see in my practice, there's a big difference between children who just grow up versus children who are raised. And so children who are raised, who have a lot more interaction with parents, hopefully grandparents, people who are going to have a positive and healthy influence in their life, do much better overall. And so just, take the time to step back and say, look at this device that is controlling so much of my time, so much of my attention. Do I want that, or do I want something different? If I want something different, I have to intentionally build those in, because my easy default is the screen, right? I'm at some level addicted to it. It's easy for me. It's easy for my 2-year-old, but what do I want to create long term, and what is healthy and good?
Have you always had a healthy relationship with phone and screens?
I would say no. I would say that I also at times have used it to escape, or just used it to relax. That's another thing we haven't really talked about. We think that, just, scrolling is relaxing or whatever, when it's really not. It's very engaging of the brain. You're not allowing your brain to rest. And so I also, have tended to use a screen to relax when that's actually technically not relaxing my brain. Something more relaxing would be meditating, or even reading a book, would be much more relaxing and slow to my brain. And so, our poor brains need to relax. They need to be able to sleep at night, right? Sleep is so important for us physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. If we are not getting good sleep during the daytime, we are not our best selves. So, looking at your sleep and saying, I need good sleep. I need to prioritize that for myself and for my family. It's so important.
It's funny, isn't it? It wasn't that many years ago where we used to think having a cigarette helped us relax.
All right.
All the research shows it's the last thing it does. It raises your blood pressure, raises your heart rate, all the things. But I'm so stressed. I want to have a cigarette. And I'm sure sadly, I'm sure in a number of years' time we'll come back to recognise, gosh, we should have done more about social media. And but you think, well, why aren't people realising that we realise it about smoking, gosh, 70 years too late, but
Right.
I think we'll realise it about social media as well at some point.
Yes. As a matter of fact,
one of the things we've certainly seen in the last, I'm not sure how long, maybe the last decade, is that people are no longer meeting their partners at work, or maybe at church, or in the community, or in bars or restaurants or clubs, whatever you want to go to. People are increasingly meeting people via an app or via a device. I wonder what you thought about that, and whether that as a start point for a relationship is not a good place to start.
I think, meeting someone online on a dating app, like as a initial starting point, is okay.
Yeah.
How you handle that relationship after that initial starting point, you do absolutely need to have as much face-to-face time as possible. You need to really get to know this person. If you're going to commit to them for life, you really want to know them. And over a screen, you are not going to get that. And so I think initial meeting, that's fine, but you really have to spend a lot of time in person with that person. You need to see them in various types of scenarios. You need to meet their friends. You need to see them handle different things that come up in their life. How do they handle themselves emotionally? Are they emotionally mature or not? And so, again, if someone, just dates someone online for months and months and months and months and hasn't met them in person, I would be afraid that they would be wasting their time.
Yeah. No, and I've seen that with friends and colleagues. Like, oh yeah, I met Jane or John online. I've been talking to them for a few months now. We'll meet in person at some point. I think, gosh, it's just, if you're talking to somebody online, you're never 100% sure who you're talking to, even as an adult, never mind as a child. So
Right,
I
right.
do think, the advice to get offline as soon as possible and meet that person in real life is what you need to do, really.
Right.
But I guess the challenge is, from a commercial perspective, the companies that own social media, that own dating apps, they make their money by us staying on them. So
Right.
it's not actually in their interest for us to find our perfect partner. They want us to keep churning through partners because they keep paying our whatever it is,
Mhm.
$20 a month to stay on there. That's
Right.
yeah. So when you think about it in that way, I think, well, they don't have my best interests at heart. They're there to make money, and then they're not
Right.
there for any other reason really. In
Mhm.
in in your practice, and when you talk
Mhm.
to people, when you counsel people, people aren't people aren't typically coming to you and saying, oh, I just want to come to you and tell you how wonderful my wife is, my life is. I'm loving every minute of every day. I just wanted to tell you that. They tend to come to you when they have an issue, a challenge, a problem,
Mhm.
some trauma, maybe something quite difficult.
Mhm.
How do you protect and nourish your own mental well-being so that you
Mhm.
don't take on board the trauma or difficulty they're having?
Mhm. Well, here's how I have learned to view it. So, typically I would meet with a person 1 hour a week, right? And so if I tell myself, okay, I'm going to work really hard during that 1 hour to be the best counselor, best coach that I can be, then outside of that hour, I am not responsible in any way for that person. That person is responsible for themselves, and hopefully they have friends and family who can also support them. We talk about that for sure, of who is your support system outside
Yeah.
of this office, right? And
Mhm.
so I have to feel good about my role in their life. I do realize, that, for many of my clients, I could just worry about them all day and worry about them all night. Are they okay? What's happening? What happened with such and such? Like, I could spend my time worrying. But
Mm.
knowing that worrying, number one, doesn't help anything to get better, right? It doesn't change anything. And number two, what worrying does to me is use up my mental energy and bring me down. And so I have to say, okay, purely worrying is not the right answer here. If I am brainstorming to try to help a client,
Mhm.
that's one thing. If I need to figure out, what resources does this client need? How do I best help this person? That's great.
Yeah.
But there's a big difference between worrying and productive thinking. So whether it's about another person, helping another person, or whether it's about your own life, am I sitting here worrying or am I doing some productive thinking? That's the difference there. And so that's how I've learned to say, you know what? Yes, I do very much care about this person, my client, and their well-being, but this is my role. And so I try really hard in my role, but after that, I step back and let the rest go. That's how I have learned to not let my clients' burdens overburden myself.
Yeah, I always worry about counselors. And gosh, they hear such
Mhm.
things that yeah,
Mhm.
I like the practice you have. It sounds very well thought out, very well considered.
Mhm.
So do you have a no, let me ask a different question. So we said at the beginning, one of the challenges with digital addiction, people being aware of smartphone overuse, whatever, and people perhaps looking for help. People aren't necessarily sure or aware that there is help available out there. And I wondered if it's just because it's relatively new, and that people have been aware of alcohol, substance abuse, porn addiction, sex addiction, whatever, for years and years, and that this is just something that people are going to have to come to evolve. Do you think we'll get to that stage where people are much more aware of where to go to? There's more places people can talk to, more people that are willing to do this sort of work.
I think we will. I think that is coming soon. I think, first of all, most people see, too much screen time as a problem.
Yep.
Most people are now learning that they do have addictive properties. Actually, addictive properties were purposely built in by the
Mhm.
creators. And so that is kind of the next step. This is addictive, right? It's not just me struggling, it's actually addictive properties at work in my brain. And then, I think the word will spread that, hey, you can get help for this. You don't have to struggle alone, which is why I have also done a lot of, being on podcasts like yours
Mhm.
to help educate people and spread the message to say, yes, there are certain things you can do yourself, but if you're really struggling, you can reach out for help. And because I'm, certified to treat this, but I think that it is a little bit slow in coming, but it's getting there through, again, my speaking opportunities, being on podcasts. I just want to get the word out and help to educate people, help encourage people to say, yes, this is something that we need to fight against. This is not something where we just say, oh, well, everybody's doing it, whatever. Because we could have said that about alcohol or cigarettes too. But
Absolutely.
that does not mean that it's okay. But it has, become a cultural norm very fast. And I want to encourage people and give them the hope and the motivation to say we can push back against this cultural norm that we have started to see these big problems with, that we need to really step back, as adults, but especially for younger people, but as adults too.
Mm. My final question, and thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous in sharing your thoughts and knowledge with us. But my final question would be, if you could picture what a digitally healthy culture might look like in 10 years' time, what would that feel like that's different than the culture we have today?
I would like to see the internet, used for informational purposes. And like, yes, I agree that, social media does allow us to stay connected with our old college roommate, type of thing. So there are certain positives.
Mhm.
I think that they just have to be handled so carefully, which is why younger people, their brains are not developed enough to be able to make those distinctions and have that self-control in order to use it properly a lot of the times. And so there are ways to use it. It's not going to disappear. AI is
No.
not going to disappear. Social media is not going to disappear. But we have to learn how to handle it in a way that is the beneficial way and stay as far away from the addictiveness as we can. And so, yes, it will be here, but we need to realize that how we grew up and how our parents grew up, that was seen as normal, is actually really critical for healthy child development and for the well-being of us as adults. And so it's not just normal, it's critical for human flourishing. And
Mm.
when we get to that point, that means we'll need to stand up and say, you know what, we can't let screens run our lives. We can't be on a screen 7 or 8 hours a day and still be a healthy person, still be a healthy society.
And are you optimistic?
I want to be. In general, as a person, I am an optimistic, happy person. Unfortunately, all of the research that I have done has, it's depressing, discouraging, all of those bad words. And so I tend to get sucked into that, which is why I'm so passionate about sharing the dangers, to say, hey, everybody else needs to know this too, not just me, right? And so I really hope to make a positive impact on society through speaking, through coaching, through writing a book as well. And so I am, I want to be optimistic, but I'm afraid, and so I guess I would say in that case, I want more people to be speaking about this. I am so glad that you have had me and, some of your previous guests who have been talking about this same subject. Everybody needs to start talking about it and being more positive about, hey, we can make some positive change here. We don't have to go with the norm. We can make positive change. I want to instill hope in people. I want to instill positivity, even though, again, I can myself get sucked down into the depression and discouragement of looking at all these harms that we see.
Mm. Cautiously optimistic, I think, is the way forward. Yeah, and like I said, the challenge is you've got such knowledge of the research that doesn't necessarily show the good things, but there is hope in that. Whatever your belief is on government intervention on different countries
Sure.
having laws, having regulations,
Mhm.
banning phones in schools, all of this. So things are happening that weren't happening even a year ago. So I
Right.
do think there is that
Mhm.
recognition. It's just for society to almost keep pace with it, because technological change is coming at us so quickly.
Right.
That's a challenge, I guess, is just making sure because regulation can never keep pace. But if we can persuade
Mhm.
society by people
Mhm.
talking, by people listening, by experts like you
Mhm.
explaining the situation, then that'll help us far 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 more. Well, thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous, and hopefully
Yes.
people listen and they recognise that, yeah, smartphones isn't evil, but it's something that we can be aware of and something that we should be in control of rather than it controlling us.
Yes, that's very true. Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've enjoyed sharing with you, and I hope to have been educated your audience and encouraged them, hopefully.
You have.